Best Mom Products show and podcast where mompreneurs share their adventures in business. I'm your host, Rachel Olson. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Stacey Delo, the co-founder of Maybrooks, the go-to online resource for smart moms who help each other find flexible careers. What started out as an online resource for working moms less than 2 years ago became much more. Focusing on flexible job opportunities, they coined terms like maternityship and returnship. Today, we'll learn how Stacey went from managing a team of video journalists for the Wall Street Journal to starting her business, figuring out her business model, and where she has found success today. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Great. Well, I'm excited to get started. I first wanted to talk a little bit about, you have 2 young children and live in San Francisco. Everything about Maybrooks is work-life flexibility, and wanted to know, how do you make that happen for your family?
Putting my heels in the ground on the time that I've set aside to be with my kids, because it's amazing how it can just evaporate, especially when you're trying to start a company. Your head is just in a million different places, and it really takes kind of that focus almost to say, I'm actually going to put the phone down. I'm actually going to just disengage my brain for a little while and just really focus on the kids. So we have a lot of help, which is great. My daughter, who's almost 4, is in preschool, and then I have a nanny share for my little guy who's about 21 months, and I spend Fridays with him and get the great pleasure of being the person to drop the kids off and pick them up, and really kind of organizing my day around being able to do that. So it does take some a lot of people to help, but we do try to make it work.
Great. Awesome. It sounds like you're living your mission of work-life flexibility. I love that. I saw that on your site. I think you put up a little quote or something like, it's Friday. I'm with my family, and it's good. It's important. It's nice that you do that, and that you also are transparent about it because of what you're doing. It's kind of that thing with all of us, whether you're an entrepreneur or working, for a corporation or a business, that you do try to find that time to set aside, and you feel sometimes like, oh, I don't want other people knowing that I'm actually doing this. But I think that the more out in the open everybody is, the better it actually is for everybody. So
I totally agree.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so you've had a long career as a journalist and managing a team of video journalists at the Wall Street Journal, and now you've become an entrepreneur. Can you kind of take us through that transition and aha moment?
Definitely. I think as a journalist, there's always a bit of entrepreneurism involved somewhere in your psyche, because pretty much being a journalist means finding a story, finding all the right people to talk to about it, pulling all the pieces together, and executing on a product. And I think there's a lot of relationship to that as being an entrepreneur. So I think I always knew that it was kind of in my DNA. I also have 2 great role models. My parents both run their own companies, so I've always had that kind of purview. And I really thought that one day I would do this. I was just always looking for what exactly would be the big motivator. And I've always been a big believer in women and women working, and obviously, again, had that role model with my own mother. So when I had my daughter, I started to really think about what that would look like for me from a career perspective, as somebody with 2 degrees, who'd worked many years, had a job that I really loved, also had kids later on the life spectrum, late 30s. So I wanted to be able to not give all of that up and still be the mom that I wanted to be. And so when I had her, I negotiated down to 3 days a week. And as I did that, I started to think about, well, if I hadn't been able to do that, what would I have done? Where would I have turned? And I started looking online, and I couldn't really find a site that spoke to me in the way that I wanted to be spoken to. So I started concepting this and launched the site in December of 2012.
I'd like to take a moment to thank today's podcast sponsor, Audible.com, the premier provider of digital audiobooks. As a listener of the Best Mom Products show, you will receive a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/bestmomproducts. They have over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Lots of great books on entrepreneurship. Check them out. What was your initial thought about what Maybrooks was going to be, and how did that change over time?
I really wanted to be able to show that there are flexible jobs that exist. So I think the jobs were always at the root of the concept behind the site. I knew that from my content background that I felt like content was a key piece of this as well, because for working moms, your career has a journey, right? There are certain times as a working mom where the pain points are bigger. And so you may not be looking for a job today, but when you have your second child or your third child, your needs may change. And I wanted to be able to provide a site that really spoke to women before they had kids, while they're having kids, and maybe after their kids are older and they're looking to get back in. And so we wanted to be able to offer reasons to come to the site that weren't just about jobs. But the jobs are really, for me, kind of the tool that is part of the bigger conversation around women and working, and what are some of the ways that we can keep women in the workforce when those pain points are really high, so that ultimately we can keep women moving on the track toward being in leadership positions.
You're going to be at South by Southwest, and I think I saw you're doing a session with Diana Rothschild. Is that how you say her name? Okay.
Yeah.
Of Next Space, which is the co-working space for women that can bring their kids. Yes, that was awesome. So it's going to be on work. Cool. Okay, work and flexibility, why women must lead the way. Can you talk about how did that opportunity come about? Is that something that you went after? A lot of the women entrepreneurs that are listening, they're doing their own marketing. When they start out, they're doing their own PR and marketing. So to see certain things like, okay, you're going to be speaking at that, which is, a reputable conference. Can you talk about how you were able to get that? Is that something you paid for? Is that something you pitched?
No, I don't pay for anything. It would be my best advice. No, I pitched it. It was one of those, of course, it was one of those things where I saw that the deadline was like tomorrow morning, and I saw it like 11 o'clock at night, and just quickly wrote up a pitch. And I think the more relevant what you're doing is to some national conversation, I think that's a really huge thing for an entrepreneur or a person with a product or a blogger to understand, that the more that you can take what you're doing and fit it into a part of the national conversation around whatever it is that you're focused on, then other people will pay more attention. And so that was, I don't know why they chose us necessarily, but that's how we pitched this. And obviously work and flexibility has been a part of the national conversation now for about a year and a half, in a way that it really hadn't been before. So I would just say, look out for those opportunities and make friends with people who organize panels or events, and figure out ways to get yourself involved with those. Offer to help, even offer to volunteer at something, at a panel. Maybe there's a mother's group where you are volunteer at one of their events, because then it just gets you introduced to a network of people who might be able then to invite you to speak.
What is one of, throughout your entrepreneurial venture here of starting Maybrooks, what is something that was an unexpected challenge for you?
I think just the amount of work that you really need to understand when you start your own thing. And if you don't have a big team, or if you have a small team, it's a lot of work. It's a 24/7 thing. And like we talked about at the very beginning, I've really had to set my boundaries so that I can have the flexibility that I want and discuss. And that's been an important lesson for me. And then also just maintaining relationships and taking the time to maintain relationships and friendships, and also your health. There's a lot of stress when you put the self-pressure on yourself to do this, and kind of figuring out a way to manage all of that, I think is really key.
Great.
And it was unexpected for me.
Yeah. I think that's everybody that I talk to who's an entrepreneur. What do you see? What are some tips that you have for moms transitioning from the corporate world into their next venture, whether they're just taking some time off and reevaluating or going back into something part-time? What have you found?
If you're going to take the time to not work for a while, I think it's really important to figure out a way to keep your foot in the door somehow just a little bit, whether it is a contract position that's 5 to 10 hours a week, or a volunteer opportunity that has some real meat to it. Something that allows you to keep something small on your resume if you do plan to go back into the workforce. If you don't, it's a different story. But if you do, having those little pieces along the way, and then something that kind of keeps you in the business language, just around other people who are in work mode, speaking whatever business language it is that they speak, and keeping your skills just a little bit fresh is going to really help you when you're ready to transition either back part-time or back full-time or whatever it looks like for you.
Great. Thank you. Those are great tips. I think that's something everyone I talk to, even as transitioning, into parenthood, those early days, that's the one thing. If they do take time off, it's that kind of fear of you worry. It's a competitive marketplace and landscape, and you don't want to be out of it for too long. And I find something that's interesting, and I think it's a cultural thing of where you're living as well. Like in the Bay Area, it's hyper competitive. So you feel, I felt that, and now I live in San Diego, and it's different, and it's a whole different, ball game. But so it's interesting. But everybody, if you do want to go back to work, those are some great tips. So thank you.
Sure.
So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask you if you have anything that you can share, a favorite quote, or a book, or an app that you use, anything fun like that.
Yeah, I think I have probably one of all of those, but the quote that I always generally tend to give is one that's kind of burned into my brain by my mother, which was, if you don't have yourself, you have nothing at all. And I feel like that's a really important thing to remember as an entrepreneur, because having the confidence in yourself is really important. You know why you started what you started, and there's a lot that happens along the way that might make you doubt some of that. But if you always get back to that piece, and if what you're doing really speaks to who you are deep down, then I think you're on the right track. We featured a woman on the site yesterday who quoted a book that kind of talked about the same concept, that everybody has a golden thread, and that golden thread that runs through you is something that should always inspire you and always kind of bring you back to the basics of who you are to keep you on the right track. And so just knowing who you are and being able to bring that to the table every day, I think keeps you on the right path and helps you kind of wade through some of the times that are challenging and require all that work.
Right. Great. I love it. I love the idea of the golden thread. Do you remember what book that was? Or
I don't, but okay, if you go, there's a great feature on our site, Mama Strong, MOMMA Strong, and it's got it on there.
Great. All right. Awesome. Thank you. I'll include that, and I'll look it up, and I'll include it in the show notes. So, so thank you for being here, Stacey, and sharing all your good stuff.
Thank you for doing this. I think it's a really wonderful path that you're on, and it's so exciting for me to see all of these women like you who are starting cool things, and it's wonderful that you're bringing everybody to the table for a conversation. So thank you for doing that.
Great. Thank you. Yay. It's a love fest.
I know.
Thank you. All right. Great. So everyone, you can find, you can go to www.bestmomproducts.com for more great interviews. And we'll have the website for Maybrooks, which is MAYBROOKS.com, named after her grandmother, which we didn't say, which is a lovely story. You can find it on the, I think, About Us section on her website. So great. Thank you. Till next time.